Good morning. Good morning again, Rinpoche, Tashi Delay. And,
Oh, yeah.
and good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your translations. Welcome to people online. Just to let people know that there's been a change of schedule. So today is our last teaching until May 11. We'll take a pause. Genla will take a rest and also do some teachings for Jewel Heart. And then we'll resume on May 11th. So in light of that, we've decided to extend the period of making offerings, if you'd like, and information for that will be in the chat box eventually. And please have a look. So, the deadline is now April 7th. So if you can please try to get your offerings in, and we'll make those offerings to the various people. And we'll begin with some prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, full destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, who with pure bodies form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomplete, one to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endow with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Do your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
뭐야?
뭐야, 딕송게.
뭐야? 오야 가리나. 오야 그냥 집송가 버신 배송래로. 니까래. 걔 송럽 군지 닝베다스. 걔 송럽 군지 닝베다. 걔서 담반 남게 ngak벨람. 걔네 탄데 남게 중화데 수다르는 시다게 쉐버자 쉐송바타로. 오야. 걔 송럽 중기지 송바 사제 좀 된데게 송럽 중기지 송바 대창만 탐제게 주 닝부초 되베이나 송거라 대외 송럽 군지 닝베테 민중들의 송거라 네바르 종아스 네바르 종아스도 다른 네반 종교래 기부 총유값을 담보 가라서 네반 종사를 가르 종고라서나 가라서 통대게 전도다로 다 단동 웃음도 통 마대 통에 매베 얘네 냐와다 이다라 소바 다 도강에 손숨스라 냐도 숨스 텐도 하다 메체 도하드 투야다 어디나네 강아라 중고송 통데 단도라 소바 대졸 파케나 강에다 직프에 망부치 통에 망부치 버튼 가서 통데도 지레 직사회 통해서 현재 거주시 현재 봐 세 두카르체네 콜라서 체세케요 마라 사야고 통야고 빠빠고 인디고 샤드고 간가세 근데 동에도서 등무슨 통대더라 어때네 시탄도 무슨도 마토에 녀외 동에 류메 책발에 서버 차외 동에 다외 동에서도 류테니 파 개네 샤셰 마보 빼면 답안데시 파 개도에 된다 기회는 다다 심어도 고 동에 양고야 당년세로 어다든지 동에 마부셔라 어든지 깨나페 내가 도와야 보면 도와 삼사 네버도 든들 발로 같이 제고 삼사 삼을 코고야 당부들이야 그래서 가라서 세명경게 르치다 세명게 르치니도와 신다 도다 살아서 버튼데 요래 대저렇게 sem게요 말아 소한테도 냐요 말아 저 소한테도 냐게 들는다 마부도 가라서 미래 무슨 토다게 따다 발라서 봐 부춘존에서 본다 마부도 대저 상마코 sem요게 되도 저 sem데 가서래 sem데 르들 때에 되어라 르담다고 하게 아니 sem데 세메세다 리버탕 르다 렌시 때문에 많이 또지 정부 학공에다 진짜 개발도도 되게 그 먼저 셈데 그도 얘나고 르단 저체서는 야 현다 진짜도 르데 야 돈도다 진담도 좀도 도시브라 대대가라저 셈데 풍부된 담에다 실파 저사 알림도 안에 저거 땅을다 지대 렌시 때문에 이마다 동네 치주에서 강가 연구도 와 대대가라저 삼부대 소소 셈데 단다 매일을 때데 정부다 야보도가 랑도 생게 야보도가 다데 텔마데데 야베 좀 참모 지sen도네 현다 던데 겨라실라 도바실 저 총소나 아니 셈데게 만나시 대고 말아 자신의 소소 셈데 참살라 매일 겨알라 참살라 할도 참살라 녀와도 던도를 제베 고가 싶던데게 근데시에 같은 가서 셈도 소라를 내고도 제나네 다다 미래데 르단 저와체나 카와카와키도 던도를 지켜서나 통해 가데가데 로아자루 차도 지켜서 가데가데도 무슨 토대에도 소리야 라한테를 domese 마데삼 당가라저 대상부당 가저데 미래가 가더 가야르삼 도데 삼삼 거려 마라 대경아치 삼로타 리다 셈진도와 체야도 삼로탄데 Sente lui da meta da ko da cha do wa. Ti le gidi ko go ti de ko ti le ngeba juan te tambu ke shi sho da. Ni jo se. Ngan do le ngeba jong ne. Ngan do kya wa le ngeba jong ne. Ha da mi kya wa se ngeba do to ba she ko do sam. Te kyo de ga ra se ne. Sha la sa wa pa ba mi ke wa de pa pa. Ke wa tu ge te re. Gombolo du sam ko to mi ke wa le tu nge ko ti shin ngan do tam je to. Ke le ten do tam je da. Kele tendo tamse namba kundu tewalas. Tendo ladambi tisra. O di tangbu tira. Ngijo tangbu di kibu chunga ngijo. Di nga zu shi zu sa di ne zo gura. Tangbu nga zu di sam tang gura. O di si song ya.
So here, as Lama Tsongkhapa has said, the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, the path praised by all the holy victorious ones and their sons, the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation, this I shall try to explain as much as I can. So here, in the first line where it says the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, so really this is going to give the essence of the teachings of the Buddha, but here this line is referring to renunciation, and renunciation is something that we first have to develop in relation to the being of small scope, thinking about the kinds of rebirth that we could take. I mean, there are those negative rebirths that we can see, like as animals, but there are beings like hell beings, hungry ghosts. There are these 6 types of beings within samsara, those that are of good migrations, being humans and gods, and those of lower realms. I mean, we can see the animal realm. We can't see the hell realm or the hungry ghosts, but looking just at what animals endure in terms of being eaten by one another and the kind of treatment that they endure at the hands of humans, being used for their skins, for their fats, for their meats, without any sort of recourse, right? This is the kind of situation that we could be born into. So here, although we can't see the kinds of sufferings of hell beings, they are described as having to endure great heat or great cold, the kind of suffering of being split into many different pieces. And even at that point, you're not actually like sort of like a lotus opening up, your whole body being split into various pieces and having to experience that suffering without actually dying. You're continuing to be alive. And so looking at those, really contemplating what it would be like to take on such a rebirth, we think, I have to avoid falling into such a state. So we can recognize that there are 2 types of things, we could say. There are those things that have a mind, those that are sentient, and those that are not sentient. So certain things like trees or rocks and dirt and so forth, they don't experience feelings, but anything that has a feeling, a sentient being, we can look around us and see how it is that all of these experience various lives. I mean, we have feelings, the cows have feelings, bugs have feelings, and the mind is dependent upon the kind of body that it takes as a support. So for example, we can see the difference when one's mind is supported by an animal body. You lack the kind of clarity of one's faculties, the intellect that one would have as a human. The sort of power of that awareness is much dimmer. And so we have to recognize that it is possible to take up any of these sorts of bodies, any of these kinds of lives. And if we were to, say, be born as an animal, we would be stuck in a form where we lack that kind of clarity of awareness, lack that ability to intellectualize or think about things. So right now we have this sort of human life where we are alert, we are aware, we have those kinds of capacities and faculties, but the mind, when we face death, when we go into death, there will be a subtle continuity that goes on, and that subtle form of our mental consciousness will then take up another birth, sometimes as a human, sometimes as a god, sometimes as an animal, and so forth. But we shouldn't think that when we separate from this body and take on a new support, we are going to sort of get to carry on this a mind that we have as a human, the kind of capacities that we have. Imagine what it would be like to be born as a goat or as a sheep. So we think we sort of have this ability to carry on with our human intellect, but we really need to recognize, we need to have a feeling about what it would be like and wanting really to avoid such a fate in the future. And so we need to have this sense of renunciation or kind of feeling of definite emergence. I have to get out of the lower realms. And what is the method for that? It is abandoning harming others. It is abandoning the 10 non-virtues. As the Master Nagarjuna has said here, all sufferings and the lower realms are a result of non-virtue, and all happiness in the upper realms come as a result of our virtue. So we need, as a foundation for everything, to really have this kind of sense and have a renunciation wanting to avoid birth in the lower realms.
Oh yeah. Oh, tenashita, kibuchungude, tende samlo korne, ane tekba pa kewa trubne, nyason lamba kewa chi, hada milike kuko, shwede trubne. Tene tal hada milike na ya samgura, kibuchungude samlo chede ya torudora. Kibuchungude chungu ranje de, chembu chayan de marwa. Kibuchungude samlo te kona o ta, milike na yabore, halike na yabore sambarwa. Tagiti Hasayate Yanti Jitan Debel Halasigo Marta. Kwa Korgan Hatus Sigara, Molet and Yumubawagi, Sungam Sungmita and Gambel Hatus Kiats Sigara. O T. Ducasser. Oh, Lada Milikena, Niasola to the pay our shot. Tayana Lada Mila Petungamabudo Asam Tunget Sorgivara. Tengal Lada Milikena, I should do some che. Samgivara me ne lu longe kangal shenji chal halekene tile ya o lu person so ne person so longe person shenji chal de ora tate samutaya chide tetule dunga yora tendu tinde te marwa yang shi yang dunga nyo hala shitu pe dunga mabu yora lu ji kato to se nyamdo lu le namji meto changba to se nyingba cha meto changba to se nyingba cha lu le timako any latos kangata kushinge de subject logare shagisa then play message tunga yungu sera namji be samle chele yo amara that indeci de otende ko tunga shibuji yote ani ngeba ke yo amara tanda nego lada me ne ya son le kesi tende de ora tende lada mele ke na ya tangara zo ha ko ra samlutana ke se tunga yore kebe tunga yore nae tunga yore chiwe tunga yore Devacha de Mani by Tunga Yard, Meduba taught the Tunga Yard, Ra Meduba the Tevada, Tajik, Tatile Tarn with Samlutana, Kiwala Neva me, Cabrina, Kikabdi, Rangomba me, Longe Prisum Soba, Kazachena, Tandus who say, Mombra, the Omara, Shenja Shira Dura, Momba me, never say, Luyana Yando Torne. Yana Yandu Tome de Joy, Kyo Sambuchule Yantugal. O Tindeche de Lada Mila Tunga, Shinche de Tua. Let a Yumbe Shawan do Tune Tunga Mabu, Yang Grassirate. O Tin de Tele turned the Tuara. Oh, Tadia Yabudo. That Tele Tarachi Chigudos, Rala Rameba, Pumbun Dolinche and Tidu Yongo, but Tele Tarachi Chigudo some never Jonguara. Tanda ko ne person sawa le person sawa loje person sawa le shenje chakba tele semcho la de ngen jong se lar me dog be suj ba ngone ya bu de me do ta samlu ta ya chena ne son la te de ya bu se da de yen na ko ten de wa ka ge re me do asam sa chene ane ko e dongele ta de ni ju ki ba ra ko lo ko ya de la ran la ran me ba le da nyom be wa ge Kichik de Chik de Jude, Lada Milikina, Kawakina, Tungajiran Shile Madevere Shasam, Tile Tarwachi Chekudo Samche, Tile Neban June, Tengapa, Shenji Chade, Neban June, Shembalon, Tangeba to Tile Tarwachi Chekudo City, the letter Yumubawagi, Kwa Koya Tile Tarwachi Chekudo Samgara, Ti Ninjura, Kwa Langeban Joing Ninjusta, Kwa Korchinja. Negab ki tosto keba yaramada pugi kaga tunge ranshi jeba dada de shasam tele tarkudo sam sem nebardo tujo pa shenja yebade so sheba lone ta nebardo tele tachi chego sam samatela 기분 dengi 긴종 세거라. 어디 교회 소로 그 인부터 담보할래. 예송기 동에래 내봐줘. 예송기 교활. 되네 코에 교활에 내봐줘 가지고 그래서. 디 종소나 안에 하다 밀게다 하다 밀게네 대야 우리 메도아섬 타르바토야기 삼르티 용교하라. 어디 소자. 담부치 가래나 직사치다 직 마디스 삼르코고도 te yabu me doa sunde ne tele kyan thong sun tele thade lo ki ra kyan ma thong ne ma da shi yabu do sam de shan de ko thade lo ke yo ma ra te de nge jo de pe ke se bore so ga ra o ki bu chung nge jo ke de ki bu chung sam lo de che tho ro sun ne ki bu theng ki sam lo ko le ten do thade sam lo ko do ya te ji na ya ve so ra ko yin bi te se de nge jo ni do ho de shi ya.
So then those kinds of contemplations of the being of small scope, where they say, I want to definitely get out of the lower realms and do so by abandoning non-virtue and engaging in virtue as the method to avoid such a fate. But here, then, the being of middling capacity sort of expands that thinking. They think that, well, being born as a human and a god might be nice in comparison to the lower realms. And here, when we say God, we're not talking about some sort of being that is transcendent, that is out of samsara, but rather a being that takes a birth in that kind of a heavenly realm due to karma and the afflictions. And so, we look at this kind of situation and think, well, oh, those lower realms are suffering. But when we look at our own situation, having been born as a human, we can recognize that we experience suffering. Like we normally are kind of attached to these various pleasures that we get to experience. And out of that kind of clinging to those, we think that this is actual happiness. But even when we begin to contemplate, we can see that taking birth as a human or even as a god isn't stable, lasting happiness. Like we might look at the heavenly realms and think, oh, look at all the pleasures that they get to experience. But at the time of death, for example, a god experiences excruciating suffering. The color of their body sort of fades. These flower garlands that they have had become sort of wilted, and they smell. The other gods sort of keep them to the side, and they know that they're going to have to fall into the lower realms. So even if we are born in one of these upper realms as a human or a god, we experience suffering. We know this from our own experience. We have to go through like aging, we go through sickness, we go through meeting with what we don't want, we go through not getting what we do want, we have to go through the kinds of experiences of uncertainty in that it's uncertain, like all of the things that we think are stable or lasting are going to have to change. We meet with those that we don't want to, we lose the things that we love. Our birth is uncertain, where we will go in the future. We have to sort of cast up and take off new bodies due to the control of our karma and afflictions. There's the suffering of non-satiation. No matter how much good we have, no matter how much pleasure we get to experience, we are going to want more and more of it. And so this is the nature of a birth within samsara, even as a human or a god. It's not beyond this nature of suffering. And so looking at this, seeing the way in which we cycle through samsara under the control of our karma and afflictions, what we are normally attached to, what we normally cling to or think of as pleasure, we see it for what it is, as being in the nature of suffering, and give rise to the sense of, I need to free myself from this cycle. Compared to the lower realms, yes, the upper realms seem nice, but they're still not beyond that kind of nature. They're within this cycle of samsara, wherein we uncontrollably take rebirth due to our karma and afflictions. And so recognizing this, feeling a kind of a revulsion for that, saying, I want to get freed from this kind of situation, seeing this. Even though from time to time we have a nicer sort of situation, we think that it's a little bit better, we think that it's kind of pleasurable, it's not beyond the nature of suffering. And so we feel this sense of, I need to get out of this, I want to renounce this. And so first we need a sense of renunciation toward the lower realms. But again, expanding our thinking, we can see that, well, even those upper rebirths are in the nature of suffering. So may I definitely get out of samsara. This first line, line that talks about the essence of all the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings. It's really getting at renunciation or this feeling of revulsion, wherein there's something that we fear, something that isn't right. We see the faults of that, and by seeing those faults, we give rise to this wish to be freed from it. So this kind of contemplation, first for the being of small scope, and then for the being of middling scope, going beyond to wanting to get out of all of samsara, is something that is indispensable for any kind of practice.
Oh yeah. Geshe tamba namjinga belams rengibetro. Geshe tamba namjinga belams. Oh, tai kibun dende samlu korne. Koale rani tarde samlu shukchembuchi korso. Oh, te ko chade. Ane samlu korgore kibun dende. Tai kibu chembe lamle lerduora. Oh, ranchibu tungele tarko samsa samlu te jangjang samlu ta. Te de medoasam. So dele pama nyandele soba pe cheshi pe yido watinde yora. Tesu samala samlu che matane so chebu che tare samlu tana marore shandi medosa. Ragatsende pama nyandele soba bupomola soba karina pe chebu yora. Konjole che robara che taye tapsi che yachi do tapsi che utoa samsa samlu ko yora. Tiko duza ko ranchibu koya dungele thana sa samrute dirme dusam rang pama chede pama nyedele sokba tesu samko yara te samlutande chede chapu mare kyongama namso yal hada mile ke sigre tondule ke sigre teda te negam na pama da nyedele sokba shenda shay ogura tenga ma tende samlutana kyo thoma meba sonjane soso pama da nyedele soso le pen tonge Chende be English Geshe Pentonge Shuna Tele Tinda Majura Simjas Mendoza de Jure de Majura Sasa Yomara. Simja Tamja Pada Mada Neda Nido Kigenda Rock watching get Tokuda Tinda Majuget de Jure Omara says Omara Samgora. Tinda Simja Tamja Pada Matse de Pamanashige Chikwa Rede to some Kishifen and Womashim Mato Kyonga Matinga Kadu in that she uses. Tanda ngora shena ta shine tinde haruskura tinde shinge omara tanda kondu saji te hikere pamche kyawanga ma pamata chini tidwalene ngaji chi se tadimashan ringdar kasa te inde simje tamje koye dungele taro chekudo sam ta simje le kyawame do sam sama condition sinyam resha sam Pama chebu maiba chindi chebu maiba simje tamje pata marda nyedo nyedo jewa rangla kadin shimbu majeba chiya mido kishi pyo nungwa ma shimbire mato chigi sama chebu resha sam te simje tamje koel tungele tarwe tab chegu do sam soso ngwene kaan tuptu di chegu do sam gyora te chedu chanju chodo simje gyora simje tamje rang chebu tawra ten dimi do sam ta kibu ringdi kibu chimbu cha gyora simje tamje pamar gyobe simje tamje kohe dungile tarwa chichagu do sam. Teyechedo, tanda soso kale kebu tanda nem gochune. Rawa, chanju chosin, simje tamjegi, dan tarsheba tuptugenge, sanjeji koban toba chegu do sam gyora. Tanda ne simjegi tan chini ku tuptug gyawana ya getane. Ne tarsheba, sanjeji gyan kushe yende kunde, niba yonsu zogwe kone. Ne shenji tan langdo ki ne tan tugenge. Shenji tan tuptuge, sanjeji koban toba chagu samgora. Te samya te samdi, ne chanju samse. Ngazu marshi tende te suse namji yora ta agora. Marshi bala soba tende bala soba tende samlata. Te chanda samjegi tan tugu do sam keba chema do sam chik samlako yora. Ta te memba ya ta shen yamji kunde sam jeside. Te kadin chimbota sama chibode. Yena soso tawandula tunge medo ti choa tena shi sangmal yore asam gyora. Rai kube tawa tamu tunge tamu sang medo tawa chunju shebe choshi me kari na top gwa shi samlu shi ora. Tidu gunyong so kembu shuk chembu shi ora. Tena shi sangmal yore asam gyora. Sangmal tawandula tunge medo baranda chikwa de te tanda tapsi shi gyore sam gyora. Takshan yamba si tiri tambo. Tada shen tsangma, tewan dole tunge midube soa den randa yoresu. Ngarazu danda samlo soso te, tunge chamu she mego yagu kanga ye konge de che shenda kari hina hinsam, 사다 도에서도 또 콘도선에 사다 도에서도 코카리는 소아카리에 같이도 가려섬 파통에대 탑시시되거라 오따때도 만들어도 왔섬 소설이야 대완돌레 동에 med들 현재 차와신 게 존나 컨디치 요새에서 티나시 소아 강가 콘조 요라 콘조 사토나시 말이야 삼겨라 어떻게 돼서 다다 현 참제 대완돌레 동에 med가 치버라 아니 라치부 대와데 삼르타 동에 대 삼르타 현달레 차와시 때도 마로라서 로 셴 대완돌레 동에 med가 냠바로 와서 딱시 냠바서로 다 제보자 그래. 다 통만 매번에 나 대화도 동에 맨도바 셰 대화도 동에 맨도바 다다데 소소데 개체슈치네. 라게 동에 대야도 대화 투에도 개체슈치네. 라체슈치네. 아니 셰라도 라도 다도 셰라 사와팅 거라. 다 통만 매번에 라 개체슈치지 버체 대야 단다바도 개게 도에지마도 야게 총통면도 왔음. 다 삼로 단단 거라 너도 왔음 버래. 통만 매번에 다 셴게 왔지 그래서 라레 셴 셴게 왔지 있지 그래서 라르다 토마메 뭐네 셴르다 랑게 시시지 랑 전달 셴 배치지 거라 다들 민도상 노샤 삼네 로 셴게 시시지 딱베 셴게 버스 거라 딱 셴게 와서 다 토마메 뭐네 나 서서랑게 시시지 성도 파샤 셴 야와르도와 라케 치슈치 라체슈치 셴 야와르도 삼르도 치버장에 삼버다 다 가르치고래 셴 치슈치 라 셴게 ton도 페슈치 야와르도 셴게 ton다 라르 당샤레 다 셴게 ton다 라르 당스도 파타디 다 셴든 버시마도 요마라 이나 랑게 ton도 담발이야 랑게 ton 타르심버다 다 투영 고추고요라 sempre quello non è sostituendo lo tanto scegli samtangore ina tonda ngomalia sostituendo tarsi betuye gora tindu taksha nyamje ko ne semke wa ase o tengi ko ne semke je simje 탐제 그 툭툭게 그것에 연대 군대기 가서 진교와 자고도 삼 기분 된게 삼을 기분 챔ber 삼을 거기도 어야 되지라.
So here, this next line then says, the path praised by all the holy victorious ones and their sons. So here we have the kind of contemplation of the being of middling scope, wherein they see the situation of samsara and generate a strong attitude of renunciation. But here we move with this line into the kind of contemplation for the being of great scope, wherein we see that it's not just us who is in this situation of samsara, but rather we look around. All of these beings, like our mother, our father, those that we hold dear, our friends, our family, they too are in this same situation of suffering. And so it's not right to only think about our own aims, our own needs, and not sort of care for those who have shown us great kindness, for whom we feel great affection. They too are in this kind of suffering situation. So here, it's not just, though, that we have the mother and father, friends and family of this life, those that we hold dear. But when we think about the fact that we have taken countless rebirths in the past, going into all different kinds of births, we can see that, like the most cherished, loved, like our beloved mother or dear family or friend of this life, so we have had beings that acted in that capacity in previous lives. And so when we look around us, given that we have taken those countless kinds of rebirths, other than not recognizing it, right? We moved from life to life, but it isn't the case that any being has not acted in that capacity as like one being for whom we feel great affection. So yes, we have moved and changed lives, but it could very well be the case that someone who was our dear mother of a past life is the person that we're getting angry at right now. So here, it's not as though we should think about just sort of me and our own aims, but again, recognizing the kindness of others and recognizing that they have all acted in the capacity as our kind in that sort of position in the past. We should say to ourselves, I'm going to do as much as I can for them. And so this, again, is going into the kind of attitude of the being of great scope, wherein we see that others' suffering matters matters to us, that we want to be able to alleviate their suffering. And so therefore we start to make an effort toward that goal, toward working for the benefit of all sentient beings, doing at the present however much we can to be of benefit while continuing to improve and develop our mind all the way until we get to that state of Buddhahood in which we have removed all faults and developed all good qualities and have the capacity to know the various dispositions and inclinations of other sentient beings and teach them, lead them in accordance with their needs. So we can develop this kind of attitude of bodhicitta based upon the sixfold cause and effect method of recognizing that all beings have acted as your mother or whatever kind being and wishing to repay that kindness and so forth. And so recognizing the kindness of others, this is a very important kind of way of developing our interest in the suffering of others. But when we also then look at other sentient beings, we can see, well, in the same way that I have this kind of natural wish to be happy and wish not to suffer, like we all naturally have that. We have this sort of sense of like, may I have all of the good things, may nothing bad whatsoever happen to me, may I not have to encounter even the slightest suffering. We see that all other beings are sentient, right? They are not like dirt or stones or something wherein they don't have feelings, but they have that exact same sort of feeling that we have. This is what we call the equalizing of self and other, wherein we recognize that those around us are not inanimate, unfeeling beings, but rather have the exact same desire to have the best, to be happy, to not have to suffer. And so recognizing that they are just like me, we see that it's not okay to cause them harm, right? It's usually when we are sort of only focused on our own aims. Well, I need my happiness, and we disregard the kind of feelings that others have, that we are violent against them. We cause them harm in that way. But when we can recognize that they are just like me, actually, it's not okay to hurt them. It's not okay to cause them pain. And so we can see that, well, up until now, I've really been pursuing my own aims alone, putting myself first, thinking of myself as more important. I've been doing this since a beginningless time, but I haven't really been able to achieve anything for myself. I haven't achieved my own aims. I'm still in this kind of situation. And so rather than continuing to pursue this kind of selfish objective, we see that it's mistaken, actually, to just pursue our own aims and cherish and value those and not care about others, neglect and not think about them. We can see that this is mistaken. This has not brought us any sort of good results, but rather if we were to exchange those kinds of attitudes in which we value the needs of others, see their aims as important, and sort of neglect our own as we would have previously neglected the needs of others, we can see that actually when we pursue solely the benefit and welfare of other sentient beings, we end up accomplishing our own benefit and welfare by the way. We've given that up, we've sort of renounced that, but we end up in that pursuit, perfecting our own aims as well. And so this sort of contemplation of the being of great scope, or how we move into that, is by recognizing that we ourselves are so intertwined with others, dependent upon their kindness, and really we need to pursue their aims in order to bring our own to perfection. And so we have this feeling of, may I become a Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities in order to be able to work for the welfare of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. Tene ta thamba te tira ka. Tese tamba namingol. Kenden thande namje jongo te sera. Ta tharba thobala ya, range thaba thogo na da shensin je thamje thabalo go yo na. Tharba thobala ya lamcho du joba Geshe Yeshe de karesna. Kenden thande namje jugbe ne pe chodu joba de. Yang da be tawa. Takche ki thanye da chebe umay tawa sera. Tongba ni se dira. Yo. Oh kasha. Kende thande namje jongo de. Oh ti tongba ni to be. Takche ki thanye da cha. Oh tongba ni to be lam de so. Te karesna. Tanda ngara sama kare samlo ko chida nga chede rawa de samlo ko do tenge sokore tenge chora de se nga de telia pechu chenge de wangju chenge de nalo yoban de chi samlo ko do kina shi tubda ma bu de sigora nang chebe kibuse nalo yoge takji rawa chenge ta se ra chi yu se yo sam ge wara ngaran zo ti sam de do rang we ta chu sam o tele tene ne nga su de ne nga e lu se nga la cha shin ja shu chi bu chu wara ene nga e lu nga e chi ji ne chi ji se de ene nga cho da shen cho da ra lu ko ya ta me go ya to khap de cha de shen cho da ta ye na ne shen do she ta shen cha le zin da tang sa ra ane da she cha ane nga e ke go nga mi ri nga mi ka wo mi na wo chi she ta ye wa ma bu she yo ra 춘주 강가 여 맞지 대초고 말해 춘주지나 여 시셔라 건주시 여 가지 지시 착당하게 삼을 돼야게 착당하게 삼을 제도산에 착바와게 가브리케 레사그레 메게 레사그레 건조하게 됐다 메게 마도 교사야 되게요 말아 착당하게 상황도 연결 아니 랜담에서 대왕게 코아코 되어라 근데 그 착배 유세지 가세 나를 고야게 착배 유시도 아니 라와도 예도와 라와도 쉽지 여be 삼로코야라 착배 유데 뭐네 전에 더 담발 삼로 따는 거 내주 삼로 따나 나세 나데 라와 남주 간주 삼로코 하나 시tembe 요마르 텐데지 같이 요마르스 거라 내가 일을 신자께서다 착배께서가 시도줘야 유랑원의 라오의 당시 현재 이동 앞에 짜는 여버지 이 고랑원의 이동아 신자 제어버지 삼고 알아 공도 사사전에 고삼제 배드 이도명아 이 고랑원의 이도명아 잘다 공개를 삼고 알아 근데 말해서 알아 이동아도 스스로 봤다고라 망샤 차셔를 담에다 마무치 수 dom샤게 시와 맞아 뒤에 장자서 하셔요라 다 되는데 지수 dom제 스스로 파지 다셔되는데 야부시비를 샤삼기와라 도자대 도자 삼루탄도 콘도서 메케다 페 도자레서 콘도베 삼제 삼루 숙침부 거야도 와 야고 딱바르신데 코랭에 봐요 말에 대신에 고구 말에 그 미코도 와서 너지 요는 지체네 도네 지체네 그 남기 도자된 일 삼성 뭐 맛이 깨무게 도샤케지 되데 그 이유경원에 콘도 사야지나 기대 콘도 사고라 그 남사 진데게 어때서서 단 고지지를 해도 왔음 진데 제라서 스스로 봤다고도 와 르파 마타베 qabli 용구도 콘도 용마르 신자 용마라 유랑도 두베치 용구에네 거를 따나다 마다나다 거기 거기에 신자의 여고라 아버 진데 약분도 삼사 땡고 땡기면도 자고 차셔를 때는 봤다고요라 스스로게 나한테 봐 때냈다고 하세 다때 어디 엄마 따외나려 땡지 내버려 줘가서 계신분에서 때라 르게 차셔 샘게 차셔 마부치 초대be 초바지로 되어라 벌써 처리 됐습니다 초바지로다 될 때는 소소 봐 아버지 야부시지를 섬지 현재 차과 로기거라 다 유랑원에 지요네 거기에서는 비내세는 지니에 지요고 되어 말해 나세 대다 그래 단데 남중 가서 배찬에 송구도 다지 차와 되게 셈시 그런가 삼브라와치 여베 삼로크 되게 셈다 살레베 게 치셔들에서다 다시 차와 되게 셈 켜냈다네 두지 풍부 뒤동데서 소보 요새 된다들이야 라오에 다 된다시 요 말다서 계란서 동바르다서 텔 셈제 라오에 셈제 라오에 같이 요 말에서 거라 텔 셈제 요 말 배차는 송구도 지달이 하나 ጾ남라 때네 신대 주바다 대시 풍부 남들네 군주 셈지셔서 풍부가 때네 발로 봐 따여라 로요 왕게 파샤네 야부도 도부도 파샤고 말지 이 거랑 찍부근에 저 라오다 된다시나 딱 거기에서지 아니 쟤는 남중가주 동분이 쉐두쉐고요 기부삼이 추마이 메멜로메 남가 메사나 슬리비 차샤 가냐 말에 소아대 말에 두시대 말에 로 콘도대 말에 나제대 말에 차도대 말에서 대저레레 전에 인게지요 말아 대절 바테네 딱 봐서 르 때네 딱 봐. 땡제 대바를 좋아해. 땡제 대바를 좋아해. 땡제 될 대체 봐. 뒤에만 붙여도 저 소소파를 따기 와래. 대가 그래서 찔을 주주 새겨요 말에. 차셔만 붙일 때는 봐 따기 와라. 라면에 매서도. Rawang to Tuba Mass, Rangshin Gimes, Ranging Oil Mass. Or did the Tomba de Samu Abu Chitabina, Nichagway, Nakorant and Nabuna, Rawa Man, and I show you don't want a me want to Rawang to Tuba Mass, so left at the top of some resa. Today, some town and a condo down I jet and Chato Yamoto Soma, Shido Yora, Yamo with all the Tangzintiro. Chadang la soba nyumo nyumo. Chadang nyumo mena ne. Le sa yina ko keba seba kuba leba se. Le la soya tam gegi. Nyumo ti mena kya le gya mara. O tam mangas rang tu du se lam ni te yora. Da.
So here then in this third line where it says the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation. So here, whether we desire just our own liberation or we seek to liberate all sentient beings from suffering by achieving the state of Buddhahood, we need to have this correct view, the view of the middle way view, the view of emptiness. And so this is a view that is free from the kind of extremes of permanence or reification and nihilism. So most of the time we have this sense of there being like an I. We feel like there is this autonomous sort of independent thing, being, and we have like my body, and these are my things. I'm using this body as though there was some sort of like controller within this set of aggregates and was the possessor of those. I mean, we see various non-Buddhist tenet holders in particular hold to there being some sort of a permanent, unitary, autonomous self there, right? And we hold to that so strongly. We have this idea of I, and we kind of cling to that, and then my body, and we extend that out to things like, oh, these are my people, like my race, these white people or these black people. We have these kind of sense, even from being very small, we are as humans, we tend to make this sort of us and them, so that from very young we make these kinds of distinctions, and so under the control of that kind of ignorance, when we think of there being this sort of I or mine that is autonomously, independently existent, we then give rise toward to attachment towards those that are on our side and a kind of animosity toward the other. And in this way, this fundamental like perception, the thing that we are, say, attached to, we cling to it as being sort of existent in and of itself, autonomously from its own side. And so the kind of the way in which this is again, there isn't an I that exists in the way that it seems to us. We feel like there is this sort of autonomous, independent I that has like, this is my body. And really, when we have that kind of sense of clinging to it as existing from its own side, right? Like the object of attachment, we think that it exists from its own side, independent of our mentally labeling it as being something that is pleasurable. And so too with the thing that, say, is our enemy, this thing that we don't like, the object of our anger, we see it as being like that from its own side. It's over there without being mentally labeled or mentally designated. But of course, this is not how these things actually exist. Like we have this sense usually, if it were the case, say that person that we see as in this kind of negative light, that is a bad person, and we have that kind of a sense, then it should be that whenever we interacted or encountered them, we should have that sense of them being bad. But say we don't recognize them, we might actually end up like laughing with that person. It's our mental labeling, right? That is, oh, that person is bad, that then causes all the rest to happen. And so here, when it comes to the way in which we do this, we engage in this kind of process of mentally labeling, mentally designated. There's a collection of parts, and we say, oh, it is this, right? And this is where we get into the importance, particularly for the Madhyamaka, of this idea of phenomena as being dependently originated, having this kind of way of being dependently designated. We think that there is something like out there, but the way that this really really works is there's a collection of parts and we mentally label it, mentally designate it. Oh, it is this, right? But if it were the case that there were something that existed as such, we should be able to find it, to point to it within within that basis of designation. But there isn't anything that we can actually find there. So here it is said that this mind that thinks I, that thinks of the self, this is really the mind of Mara or the mind of a demon. We sort of hold to these compounded aggregates as if it were like an actual self there. And there is a self that is designated by thought, but not in the way, it doesn't exist in the way that we sort of, it appears to us to exist. So here, if we were to search within that basis of designation, as the verse that came earlier, the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not air, not wind, not mind, yet not apart from any of these could we find such a self. So there's no single thing that we can point to. Again, these phenomena are dependently originated, dependently designated. They lack any kind of inherent existence from their own side, autonomous, independent sort of existence. And so when we come to this kind of a recognition that, say, the object of our attachment doesn't exist from its own side inherently like that in the way that it appears to us, or the object of my animosity doesn't exist like that as it appears to me, this has the power to pacify our afflictions. This kind of understanding of phenomena as being dependently designated, interdependently originated, helps to pacify our afflictions and the full realization of emptiness, eliminate them entirely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that the Tongbanyeti, Sheduzam, Sapso Chekoya Mamboyaton. Oh, dear, don't go to get so good. Tension Debra Joanka, Tenet Tongbanyeti shares. Mabo Kandachi in Arwa. Mambo is torn and a teletan Kungo to Gurmato Chief Tom McGuinn, Koran Janga Chibujanga, two chiefs and two young Chiomara. Mabo Karina. Kansa inanda, Kambutar inanda, Namdu inanda, Kanga, Shitama, Kamba inanda, Zabuli inanda, Kaga in the Chibade. Mamboja Sone, Teletana and the Namdu Res, the Mire, the Zabuli Res, the Casa, I pay Res, Major Tashara. Tita should tin and Lega Mambo or a Chasha Mambo. Tezo Rere Kere de Omara, the IPD Sachi Omara. In a considerate legacy, the legachable shot. Mijik Lagbechi shoes on all quick shoes on Segura, Lagona as all con Nugget Shagura. Satin at top was some die order, Tidu Yongachi order. Kasha number dark killing, but that's all the babies and tissue. Tamana and Tarba Kashi shower, Sanjay Koban to a shower. They were done that to get to the say. Titu Yongi or she Yongi door, so would not love another door. Naya showed a ten at top or something. Lagwa Nage Marwa, Nam Marwa, or Tinashi. Nam to the Chasha read the legacy, Mambo or a consul legacy order. Did read the legacy of the number legacy of Shagoto, Chao Chile shots and number two shots. Nam to Mara, Chijan, Nam to Mara. In a Kanga, so well attended, then Nam to days, and then Nam to period Kanga charging a shadow. Computer in a tinner legacy, Mambo or the Tesoro legacy to tell Tobal attend Pata, the computer legacy of a shadow. The tension never Joanka, Tenet Tomba, Shara, when it tomba the Eswara. You know, your mother no mere Maratas, Tenet talk about some shower, Esse. Jidang Tanya, Chiglatania, Ditchis, Lapsona, Chasha Mambo Sobachilatin Patagi or that Chasha legacy with the Ticoran legacy of Shagura. Then the Deva Joas on the Chacha Nugura. Chawach and get Shagura. Tomba Neres the Chawach and get man and like your man to Castle. Mikiwa man, a Kaimana Chawach and get him have a shara. And then you Shimbuda. Chanju some that to the Carson show, Shakwe, Tondaromana. O Tin de Tomban is to do that. Tames do Rama Tames. Number time ever do this or this, Ramwin betame taji rama sindi tame pumbule tension betame tene tawa sambi tayo mado ene te ke she ko ke omara tunye nyoya ta chi te wa toya ta te yung ma to o ti yang sem sha ko yora wa ti chi sun.
So here, in explaining emptiness, we have to take some caution. As the Master Nagarjuna has stated, whatever is dependently originated, that is empty. That is explained as emptiness. So here, when we talk about emptiness, we shouldn't think that that means just like something is utterly non-existent. Again, it doesn't exist in the way that it appears, but that doesn't mean that there is like say no self at all. So when Buddhists are called proponents of selflessness, it isn't that they assert that there's no self whatsoever, but there isn't, although there isn't a self that exists from its own side. When we hear say empty, it's empty of that kind of inherent existence. But it's not that those things are utterly non-existent, whether we're talking about like a person or a computer or a plane or a house or the world. On the basis of a collection of parts, we then designate with a name. We mentally label, oh, that's a person. Oh, that's a computer. Oh, that's a plane. And when all of the various parts within that basis of designation function and work, we can say like, oh, the plane is fine. The plane is working. But if we were to say, look for the actual sort of thing, like for example, if someone hits you with their hand, if they slap you with their hand, you would say, oh, he slapped me. Well, it isn't the case that his hand is him, but we can speak about that being the case in terms of the way that things function as dependently designated. So here again, when we say that Buddhists propound selflessness, it isn't that there is no self whatsoever, but that it is a dependently designated self. So when we like, for example, posit that we aren't undermining functionality in the way that things work, the fact that karma accumulates and will bring forth results and so forth. Like when we say, oh, you know, my hand hurts or I hurt, and the hurt is in your hand, it's not as though we can point to where that exactly is. We can find the thing and bring it forth, but yet you're experiencing pain. And so each, like for example, when a plane flies, all of the various parts are doing their work, and say one part has a problem, and then we would say, oh, the plane's broken. Well, the plane is not that single part, but it is on the basis of the functioning of those parts that this plane can function. So without going to an extreme of kind of nihilism, we can say that phenomena are empty of existing from their own side, but are merely dependently designated. So here, if it were the case that you know the self were completely non-existent, what would be the point of teaching any of this? What would be the point of talking about liberation or talking about compassion for other sentient beings? Why would we want to generate bodhicitta for the benefit of other sentient beings? And so Buddhists assert selflessness, as in there's no self that is existent from its own side, independently, autonomously, but rather that there is a dependently designated self. And within that process of dependent designation, all actions are functional.
Oh yeah. Oh, that don't go Karsura Sena. Oh, take Karsura Marado. Same day number on the shade, Karshigurus. Same day, Samurtang Dante. Mobokurang nature and do now, and she someone tempertina, she embrace some day you mera. Tezolia, Tache, Cheche, and pa. She nature the nature one at the carina, Tisha go to Tass and get the career. No. Oh, and then we don't want me on the carina to nature one at the bar, share to some tango. Similar some time, top the shit of Nigadira. Some some which at the Lebaya Jetaya, Chamba, Niji Sosa. Shirab Yachat in the ping over nature one at the carina, Tisha Pachia. Oh, today some Lutane. Kanagazuka soda. Tanda the Samlutan, oh, Sanje, Tagbe, Shanche, Basera. Simply Tamje to Samlutan, Tendis the Yoya Mar, Sut with the Samson Samgidwa. In a sim Koran, the never the pay, Sam Koran Ranshindi. Kasura, Versa Wasura. Simply Ranshi, Versa, Tamanam the Luburu Achera. Simply Ranshi, the Sever Ranshin Chesere. due to Juba Tanda Dinashin, Satona Shire Homara, Kobe, due to Madrugashi. Tizuli thinking you are the due to Madruga Severan Shich. Simbi Rangshin Vesawas, Kondo Naje, Trado and Dancy, Mishibe Momba to the Luburuade. Kotama Sona Kope Yar dry order. Shegacher dry order, Sound dry order, Kondo Mavis dry order, Naje Mavis dry order, Chun dry order. So similar song, which had the Tabgicha, Jambani said, Yajetan Yore, Nelu Shebe Shirabjichan, moving Nezu Chimichin Shed, Shintu Yore, Sura. Kare Sheba Korande, Tanwe Ranshichere, you Shengang, Sever Ranshichere. Tipeju Yabu Chetona, that some Shengang, never Yonsu Soba, Momba Kanga Trani, Pekanga Yabu Shentungegi, number times the Chebishil and Giorgio Yore Sigura. And thing as assembly shower. Then there's a to tend of China, Cochidan, the Zamulina Sada, Toda, Shing that did the Chudu, Shangamidua. In a dinner to tend to the pages and a cardiac got the quarter of the hours with the drum in the Soyadova. Never Chambush within the Soyadova. To tell Yako, join the pass, dinner teach Yawar of Chichidisa. Dinner sing the same day at the Yora. The same in the day. Some Kora Tangmayaba, Namgar and shit down. The to tank teacher Yoko, my tower to see the pesha than Namji. Or Tinashe, Churan, Yok, don't every teacher the air, Shinti Tangmamato, Yopasirete Omara. Tinashe, similar to the Tipe, during the Kuran Shinli Shun, the Kagan Drumato, Tindema, Desigora. Kagan Drea Yordes, Penangazo, me Kondo Sabachina, Tabaris, Sebe, Kondo Yimi Samlutan. Sebe pen samlutan de to joag ni mata meta drive te ngazung sum tok to ra te khaje komba te sam ko ya je drive ba simse de te sonda simse tamje le sanje ji rang xin yu se yo simse tamje le sanje ji re yu se ara zo kang ya ten de ya ron re yo de se kare tu je ne te ral te rang xin chen ne te le chu ji me ten de ma re se Sosan Kone Trucheta, Soba Sanja Chumden, the Mambu, or the Tezuki Sungi, or Setu, Nelu Tatu Shangan, Yongo, and she then come like up Kavlia. Sosan Kone Trucheta. Tishini Meshita. Sanjaki, two Nima condition, but the Naranzo Simjanelu to the Sanja Simnel. Chikbayore. Chi the Peju, I was in the Arshim, but she the Peju Matasha, the two she tedera. Tishini Meshita. Ryuchena Lucien thought Sanjay Bushas. Sanjay rigged Sanjay at the Rig Chickbay, the Sembiranshi, Vesa, the Chickbay order. The Kososo Yajatang Madan later order. Or think they attended Juru Missiba Mare, Tinde Jursiba, or think I do Tinde Lotto Kiwang, Tuja and the Tuja Tagara Tagu, some Kashet in the Sanga Chikumar. Tinde member the social and the way you were the same day. Such a Bushi, but oh, this is love there. Then the murder stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So here, the mind and our way of thinking, we can develop our wisdom by not just sort of accepting the way that phenomena appear to us, but actually beginning to examine that. Is that actually the way that it exists? And so we need to use our mind in the proper kind of a way, because our mind has an incredible potential. We need to think about the way that phenomena actually exist. We need to develop our wisdom and that side of it, as well as developing a sort of side of goodness, the method side, trying to develop within our mind things like love and compassion and so forth. And so then there's the side of wisdom, of actually using our mind to investigate the way that things are, their actuality, the way, their reality. And we have the capacity, we have the ability to use our mental faculty in that way, such that we can, again, develop that side of like goodness, the method side, our wisdom side as well. It's dependent upon the mind. When we think about the nature of mind, the mind is clear light. It isn't something that is like atomically, materially existent. It is non-material. It has this nature of being like luminous, of being clear and knowing. And yes, we have these kinds of stains in our mind, but they are adventitious. They are temporary. Things like jealousy and our attachment and our pride and our anger and so forth. We actually have the capacity to reduce and to remove those. They aren't like sort of integral to the nature of mind. They haven't penetrated the nature of mind, but yet the nature of mind is something that is, again, clear and knowing, is sort of luminous. We can remove all of that lack of knowing, that nescience. We can remove all of those kinds of stains and obstacles. And this is like the mind, again, is not something that is material, that is atomically established. But if we look at the kind of material world and the things that they are able to do with atoms in terms of refining those kinds of materials in order to be able to use them in different ways, think about like the sort of the capacity there. And then we look at the mind, and the capacity is even greater in terms of our ability to separate out those sorts of faults. We have the ability to change. And this is something that we can see directly for ourselves. Like if someone is really angry and they begin to think about the defects of anger, they think about the benefits of patience, that kind of contemplation begins slowly to change the way that they act. We can directly establish this for ourselves. And so all sentient beings have this nature of Buddhahood, have this like Buddha lineage. It isn't as though we don't have that kind of capacity, that we are, well, I'm a bad person and I'm just never going to be able to change, but rather, as it is said, the nature of mind is clear light. And this is something wherein we can see that the sort of enlightened activities of perfect Buddhas pervade all, are all pervading, pervade everywhere. There are times when, through the power of the Buddha's blessings, we are sort of spurred on toward virtue and so forth. And then it says that the sort of nature of the Buddha's mind and our mind are no different, in that their mode of abiding, their sort of actual nature, our own mind is no different from a Buddha in terms of its nature. The difference depends upon the kind of effort that we have made. And obviously a Buddha has made the effort to develop their mind to its fullest capacity, but it's not as though we don't have that potential within ourselves. So we need to develop a kind of confidence, a kind of assuredness in ourselves based upon recognizing that this mind has incredible potential. We have the potential to develop all the way to Buddhahood. We shouldn't see that as something that is an impossibility.
Oh yeah. Oh, that on that tuition tire. So sem saru taeta. She yar taeta sosoliti yohra. Sosolaba yora. Tede namjune tani dagen goen de shane sushin godukur. Le dangemba chebala tani dag pangbuis. Sangbo dangemba karchik do tan soso semde sangbo chata. 신에게 찬이들 갈갈도 소소소소 따도체 야채 담고 쓰므라. 근데 당이 다근 거 소소 건접 소소 시에도 그래. 건접 현대 때에 요 말을 쓰거라. 타조 전에 소소를 알려도 제고에도 소소를 알려요라. 다게 조 다게 지시들을 줘. 내 당년 받제 봐라 당이 다 방고에서. 소소소소랑도 가르치도 상보당 년바당 뭐에 내주다 틈바당 몇든 가르쳐 소소소소 따져서는 야야견 줘요라. 소소 셈비야 야채 담고라. 근데 개첨부지를 소소 개첨부를 해서 시작해야 돼. 가르쳐 시작해서 소소 셈데 때야 부지 때데 유지를 따는 소소를 따는 소소 남겨다 따도 전에 야게 줘야버데 고타 쉬사라. 등아주 유샤는 남겨랑 자인에 다가 샤샤라. 콘도 잡으러지는 콘도 잡으러 연대 인삼그라. 단대 콘도 잡으러 땅가지. 어디인데 가서라. 근데 네버 첨부지여서 소소소소 그접체 도그래서 이제 데려대어라. 데도 다 동네 가서 오라. 기부 총거다. 민조다로와 기부 총다 데다 민조. 아니 자주 semba 자주 semla 소바. 대줄에 로림지 차네. 말아줘 고 가서라. 야게 줘야 여바시 터바다 삼바 공바천에 림지 야게 줘야 연데 탑도 산제지 고바 토야 여섬. 대토베체도 단단히 잔이 터바다 삼바 공부전에 소소심의 상부다 신용의 차대 공대야 빼와 저기 대체도 추년기에서 공루세던 데서 버쇼세 안되다.
So, in brief, it's really important that we see our own mind as important. We see ourselves as important and make the effort to make our mind better and better in terms of that side of goodness, as well as to develop our wisdom more and more. Like as the Buddha has said, you are your own master. Like I am my own master and own protector. There's no one else that can do that for you. And you are your own witness to the virtue and non-virtue that you have done. So no one else is going to sort of be able to protect you other than yourself. So here, this is really getting at the fact that you are important and that you have the ability to change, to develop the mind more and more. So if you sort of give up from the beginning, saying like, oh, I'm just an angry person and I'm going to stay angry. I'm just jealous and I'm going to stay jealous. Then you're not going to be able to change, right? But we have the ability, if we make that effort, to be our own protector, to be our own master. And so in terms of how we generate these kinds of things, it is by working with our own mind, beginning with a kind of attitude of renunciation, of the being with small scope and middling scope and so forth, developing this kind of attitude of bodhicitta and a realization of emptiness. We should have this sort of sense that like I have the potential to improve, to develop, and I'm going to make the kind of commitment to, by listening to these teachings, try to put them into practice. And eventually I myself will become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So here, let's set a motivation particularly grounded in the kind of potential of our own mind.
지선
Yeah, decent.
어야 당아도야 어야 쇼로가 카레 니스타고데라
Dari.
니스탑게셰 니슈 저거 어디야 어디래 단데레도 어야 라서 단니발시시라 어디 답게 왕지 개발시 또다 왕주 챙겐게 공부도 텐데 개발시 추트네 고고레 스티시도 왕챙겐게 너부터 주파 고고야라 어디 고야 되겠어도 어디 당부도 가르스나 고야 돼 이스타구라 시베 셔트를 다들 따라 시베 겐신 리사와세 로와 리베 셰라 딜란 점세 그러니까 나신 그바 통주르바 뭐부터도 켜지 소소야 다 메드 컨데 고그랬으나 라 근데 왕지 개발체 왕지 겐게 개발체 그 롬볼서 버테스바 고고야라 고사시오라 데데인데데세 제 컨데 고그랬으나 셰베 겐신 렉상 와스도 개발체네 제텐데 고고레세 대거네네 셰베 제어바 야보지 마고나 셰베 제어바 도줄 셰바 마셰베 셰바 쳔부제 메어버들 셰바 쳔부제네 근데 냥가 요레세 근데 대베게 쳔부제 고고레스고라 예 요레세 리바다 미릭바시 리바다 미릭바바 셰베 셰바 컨데 캡고 뭐그 야보셴겐게 로와 겐신스 고 냠뇨 연게 또서 얌 캠버스고라 사바사냐 거는 고 냠뇨 매나 가고요라 아니 링에나서 오야미 치치단데 릭토메기 릭치와라 테시기 말아 야 릭토메치죠라 미치다네 릭고 상보랍신게 릭틴데 고마도 미트로보다 틴데 릭테 우지와 말레시고라 링에나 님라 temba sa mejobe resawada oti lega to tende ti sigma rese resambu tende ko rese jene ka sere shebe kenshi resawa se tende do rishi ribashela tigla jemse rimari langdo ya woshinge ene sawala jingeji tigbachewa jibashi ko rese zemgenji kware tigla zemgenshi sawatarwa ene tigla zemgeswa tigla zem 근데 가래 나신 그거 통조라 나로를 밀이야 본보다 더 봐 tumbo 공개치 거라 밀 tumbo 챙겨치 거라 근데 신나신 땡길라 거기서 그 상황다 이제 그로 리바실라 딜란 잠바다 왕제나 왕제게 편줄이야 나로래 참부로 된데 거라 틈비 자와데 제베 그거 개버리자 통화라 요라 그냥 망보 따도 켜지 된데 가서래 그때 대대대 제가 야구 국제 생겨 된데 꼭 그래서 그 시식도 정말다 그래서 통조로와 네 망보 따도 켜지 so 된데 지 야구 꼭 그래서 된도 야 될람들
So here then, picking up in the text, we are going to be picking up with verse 329. And this is dealing with, and here there will be various topic headings, but we're still sort of in this section dealing with appointing various ministers or advisors. And so here this is talking about gathering sort of special, those that govern well, or those of special sort of power. So here it reads then in verse 329, may you always be accompanied by many advisors who are mature in knowledge, of good family, well versed in public policy, afraid of misdeeds, not contentious, and able to see what should be done. So here, if you were to appoint ministers or advisors who are not sort of special power or special kind of skills, then they might end up putting out punishments for those who shouldn't be punished, and not punishing those who should be. So that will cause a kind of decline in terms of the law of the land and so forth. And so first, they should be again, of this kind of special power and knowledgeable in terms of what is right and not right. And so having some kind of, I mean, the actual word is sort of elderly, but really it's referring to, as it says here, mature in knowledge. If you appoint someone who has no experience, who is totally new to this, it's unlikely they will be able to carry that out well. And here, where it says of good, and literally it's like lineage, this is not necessarily looking at the sort of like higher and lower in terms of like a caste system or something like that, but from someone who is from a good background in terms of having good qualities within them. And so that then is a quality that they should have, as well as being knowledgeable in terms of worldly affairs or public policy. And they should have harmony among them, not being sort of contentious. So when you have the boss and various workers, there should be a degree of cordiality or harmony among them. And then here, the last line says, and able to see what should be done. So based upon having those kinds of knowledges, they should be able to see what is necessary in terms of various actions to take. And then it says like that is who you should appoint as advisors.
뭐야? 돈이바 랑이 짜와던 데뭐 그래서 tel야 전제를 숨고는 시도 랑이 짜와던 데뭐 그래서 가두이나 팀근데 땅구이네 현달을 짜와던 데뭐 그래서 어딜 가도서는 세외 지수 송고래서 미도가르바 좀 주고야 가리나 그 잠바도 세외 거네고 지수 송고를 마도 공도당아 저다 도부 땅구 삼사텐데 전에 뒷삼다 요마르서라 되게 제발 개발도 되고 첩첩부친 게 매도가 samlu tama dunga tezula lakba dunga nyingchi chene ko yagu yunga tabsi chego lese uramada ko metu jari shasa yawar tohne yukshane kaan tutu che tende chiyo marisera tikba chebola keba dung ying jawar chaware te teba tende che gube kyusen tikba cheba tuzu keba dung ying jawar cha gube 산제다 근데 근데 송도와 대주기를 봐서 대바스다 다 당보들아 당보들 가르쳐서나 제외 송화를 잡아서 미도장답을 침례 두고야 간거데 제외 권에 따오래서 대가르송도세나 왕제바 남제시 때려나 체바 송다서 왕신게 저거 내배 노르지 체발서 봐 어떤데 방부 겸네 좀 소야다 근데 지금 말해서 버려 체바 겸네 노르기 잘라 마부츠 거에서네 체마 대샤 마부고에 침례 소야요다 어떤데 맞으세요 왕제바 남제 노르지 체바다 전도 소화다 대발라 속과 지대로 릭버치나 어디고 팀바치네 야부지 시고 그래서 그러나 되냐야 릭바 교제 메게 되시 그래서 지대 릭버치나야 지대 릭버치나야 릭바 교제 메게 되시 어디다 고쳐를 주에다 또 가르쳐구나 또 제대로 넘보다 그 샤베 메디 제쪽으로 그러나 그도 돈 된대 제거요 말해서라 해버려 교제 가서래 미게 대해서 균인지 렘바르케네니 슈나서 심지 당분에 콘도 따도데 콘도 다 독자들 삼사든데 마서자 다고 교라지 땅고래 야오르를 지나섬 근데 닝지 제수에 권에 제고를 해서라 닝지 렘바르 기내서 기내니스 슈나 동아다 다고베 겨버버 셰자 공다시 슈 야부제 고 교와 친샤 삼산도나 네 전에 당고래서 거라 배 체준의 체코라 전에 주에로 되세요 말해서 거라 슈나 동아서 다도 제수 소라 저세서 가지이나 제외 제수 소네 텐심체고도 맞아 콜베 간나나 제요 말해서 거라 되기도 아야 야 어디서
So then next is this topic of making oneself compassionate. Talking to the king about how they should be loving or compassionate. And this has three different topics. First, how one should carry out activities, holding them with compassion. So even in the case of saying having to imprison or punish someone, one should do so with a kind of loving attitude. And then how, in particular, those who have done non-virtuous actions are sort of a special object of compassion. And then the sort of the reasons for that or why that is logical, looking at how the Buddha has spoken about this and so forth. So here, as it says then in verse 330, even if they rightly fine, imprison, or corporally punish wrongdoers, you, always being moistened by compassion, should show kindness to those punished. So here, this is specifically talking about those who transgress the law. One should view them with love, with compassion. And so, first of all, one shouldn't those who are actually going to carry out these kinds of punishments shouldn't levy excessive fines against people, nor sort of excessive jail time or corporal punishment, but should be done according to the laws. It shouldn't be sort of, and it shouldn't be the king himself who actually carries that out, but rather the ones that you have appointed, those various ministers and so forth, should carry out those kinds of the implementation of those punishments. And as the king, your continuum, your mind should always be moistened by compassion, such that, say someone has made restitution, has made an apology, you should allow them to get out and so forth, rather than imprisoning people, punishing them, fining them out of anger. It should be done out of a kind of sense of how can I help this person to improve? What can we do to make this a better person?
뭐야 다시로가 숨지 소치 되마 니버 틱바 제발라 학바도 싸워셔와테르도아 틱바 두어 생게 파세발라 사바베 두버 첩침부 생게도라 베야완도네 미테 두자르셔서 베야와도 기와 마르셔 콜라 학바도 싸워셔서 고 규슈 땅에 삼로 땅고레셔도아 미세 득바 제바 예세도와 미세 득바 제바 참에 질려서 파세바 마사발서 봐 근데 전에는 참매벨래로 개완디네 시설다가 녀완도 그래서 등이 바로 참신다 매번 밀루토벨서 보면 참에 질려서 지나서라 참에서 미세베 득바 제바 루젠다네 탐제라야시도 미세 득바 제바 예 루젠 남네 탐제라야시도 접신부시게도 탐제라야 개버 köje 딱 말이야 인지 펜션 코나케세 개버 kö란게 뚜따도 인지 왕게 펜션 코나케 버마도 콘도 잡진 쉐버레 샤삼 양가 틀는다 바치야다 동에 땅에 텐데 삼르케 줘 말이세라 참에서 득버체베 류진 탐제리야스오라 개버 köje 뚜따도 인지 펜버 코나케 펜션 코나케 버마도 티 야와르도네 야와르도 Nesim number tamjetum bechas, ya tiskuna.
And then, second is then being compassionate, especially to those who have committed very heinous negativities, like, for example, the 5 deeds of immediate retribution and so forth. And here it reads in 331, King, out of compassion, you should always make your mind focused upon benefiting all beings, even those that have committed the most serious misdeeds. So those who have done grave negativities, like, say, killing one's mother or father, you shouldn't sort of cast them aside, thinking like, oh, there's nothing to be done for them, or neglect them in some way, but rather they should be viewed, especially with compassion. And so, again, a negativity of immediate retribution would be such that one is guaranteed to take a negative rebirth. There's no sort of hope for gaining a human rebirth. And one should exact a punishment in a way that is wanting to ultimately cause their benefit. It's out of a kind of attitude of altruism. So it's not out of wanting to cause them harm or wanting to make them suffer, but rather even those who have committed the gravest of negativities should be treated with only an attitude of kind of altruism and wanting to bring them benefit. Lare.
득바시에 참신신게 삼백일래라 소바신게 도줄야 아니 자와치와디 테이르에서 뒤주신식도 가르스는 미세 득제 수치바 개발도야 닝지 기세 지르 닝지 당니 냠바 대다니 얘네 당니 침베 닝지 내스 어디를 다단다디 데바카스르스나 참매발라 소바 틱바 메세바 찹침부신게 틱젠지 강사 데졸라야시고라 데네 파스발라 소바 텐데치게 강사 데졸라야세 닝제와 레기스라야 학바도 닝제와 챤네 로아 레기 최제 당일에 냠바 데다 코치오다 tumba 틱바 마부사네 네 송로엘 소바 동에 마부 녀고 차데오라 데다게 Geshe Dani Chimbe Nijin Ne Pidu Joim. Geshe Chanju Sambasogo Sakbardu Tikba Sabchimbo Sange Tazola Lakbardu Zawa Shakurmado. Tela Niji Tawata Yawardone, Tam meeting the drum. Conscious some use some courage and to Wutango Santindici Marisera. Oh, Church. Nejoba Shigabala started Lungitan at Devena. Chidar mane kya pena de pechan soda. Chida amado zukanga de sosupugo. Chiki yabu menge de lia lagbar du tawachir. Tako karshan sa maubana kunkyo anyu sam lagbar du tawachir mado. Ko duja resa ko yagachi hame yusho sam yawar dorgi marechera. Kebar do nete bula tonjiwa. Nasala soba tubu nagechi venada. Kange manga yugechi ne tele lagbar du simde chigre sora. Tishe chanju sembe che tamba mela kebado. Chanju sembe ke tsawa deya Tamba Maike Mituga to Lavardo, and it's all she would matter. Tis a Yavarto and a coat to Zari, you should say Yavarto Yomaris, some Yara. What about to see Juna?
So next then is verse 332 that is really getting at why it is right or logical for one to have a special kind of compassion for those who have committed negativities or those that are negativity or are negative, in particularly negative. So it says then you should particularly have compassion for those that have committed the serious negativity of murder. Those ones who have ruined themselves are indeed worthy of great persons' compassions. So when it is the case that someone has done something like those 5 negativities of immediate retribution, killing one's mother, killing one's father, and so forth, you should have a special kind of compassion for them, given that it is that the compassionate one, the sort of great being, and the bodhis, so referring to the children of the victors or bodhisattvas, see them as an especially sort of important kind of object of compassion. So here there's an example then given in a quote that is quoted here in the commentary. Then this is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 verses in which it says, just like how a mother in particular has like great compassion for a child who is afflicted by sickness, so too those who are sort of great bodhisattvas, those who have this kind of heroic love, have an especial kind of compassion for those who are unholy or who act negatively. So if a mother has a sick child or who someone who is, their child is suffering in some kind of way, they have a special sort of compassion for them, not out of a desire of retribution, right? But thinking about the future and thinking about the loss in the future. And so too, when it comes to someone who has committed an especially egregious misdeed, one shouldn't sort of cast them aside like, oh, they're irredeemable, or ignore them or something like that, but have a special kind of compassion.
Oh, yeah, that's some Sanji Ching Dewa Shawashida, Johnny Yebeko, Dewa Shawures, Johnny Tawa, Johnny Jobapa Lutu Taya. 才每次过到镇里就听着member say，要把镇来当我当，镇就这样，对吧？是吧？镇来这边那个时候都不当就嘛，这时候屯进商业同业岗位也不在我这时候，他当不得了，镇来当过些的了，这个是年纪新人下俺把的，年就镇人当我的这些。 Somba be nyam chunga to chobu be kange shabu yo getende ina ane chon mabu ma chu se ni ma chik so ni zo de ta chon le chu ne ta le sha ne ya de se wara ni che kam ra be ta ma do so ni che kam sha nga pa se ta shen da zo ina ya ko ka je ka na ni ma nga chu se tinde ka ma do tele la wa chon le ka jo ma de se ra nyam chu chon nam ta wa de se Yam Chunjung gets a better to say you are not Tamazusa. Lama Namjachiri, Lama Ta, Shida Kangi Manga to Zina, Dagadachi, Sarah, Kakaga, you must have choose a Chanchukunashu. That's a matter, Mr. Coraton Chuachi matter. Many Gaya Metro, remember, John and Son to your member. Session, he says, Mr. Coraton Chusha, attended Sula Manchester. Ni xinga la so what de pa zhen de dang gu de是吧？但现在现在是在出进的现在呀，你们就刚也有的的那要不当过的是，听明白就你们开始就切准起叫嘛的是，那么年都吃完了，年都吃完当，全部的提出来你们开始嘛是当了切准起叫嘛是，记着吧？俺呀没这个军队下班没法子。 赚了没赚啊？赚了他也没吧？没这个赚了些，真正那边满足谁了的？满足谁了呀？地球了呢？
So then next is
Associate.
how one should sort of take care of prisoners in terms of freeing prisoners and making sure that they are comfortable or well cared for while they are imprisoned. And so here one shouldn't make prisoners miserable, really like torture them while they are there, but rather one should make sure that their needs are met and so forth. And so this will come in the various topics here. So first is releasing prisoners, and then second, while they are in prison, making them comfortable. So the first comes in 333, where it says, either every day or every 5 days, release the weakest prisoners, and see that it is not the case that the remaining ones are never released, as is appropriate. So here, those who are most sort of in bad situations, like are very weak or are very impoverished, who are in kind of dire straits, you shouldn't imprison them for long periods of time. So either every day or every 5 days, one should release the weakest of prisoners, particularly if they haven't done something that is particularly egregious. One should make sure that they are able to be let free. And those that say have more, here it says have more strength, but one should release them as is appropriate without having them remain there forever. So basically, it's saying that there should be no lifelong terms. Those prisoners should be seen as being, again, those that are really destitute or in difficult situations. They shouldn't be held in prison for a long time, and so they should be let go. But even those that are, say, more difficult or more challenging or a little bit more aggressive and so forth, they shouldn't be kept indefinitely, like, say, for a life sentence without any possibility of being released.
Oh, yeah, that did it. Talk all this. Some associate. Oh, yeah, talk all this. Kuning Gaya. Dancing Mays. Kuning Gaya. Dancing Mays. Oh, Kuning. John Gala. Dancing Meba. TVS. Tell order. John Gala Chu Chepe. Never chet in the Chavina Sura. Tell it, Tomba Mimba Chene. Chicago. Niene tomba la soba, Kenya tomba la soba, tende sudene, te dan gewa resugara, tele tomba memba kebe. Tomi, chisi yoba, tisi do niene ji tomba dan gegre esere. Tomba memba la nebani, kemi meche bara, ngosu, sovche so meche be, seya, nye songe chu tikba, normal sokba diweche. Ta nye songe tungele sokba tezo, 용에게 뒷바사 그래 뒤바 땅 그랬어요.去年 가야 당시 매바다. 전에 땅에 매바다. 텔레 tomba 근데 삼리 땅에 tomba 멤버지 그랬어. 팀당 게 그랬어. 소소 tomba 라야다. 그냥 tomba다 그래. 도미 텔레네 규미 제바 뒷바사 tomba 멤버께는 뒤견도 뒷바사 그랬어. 어디로 그 말했어. 야, 딜람. 이봐.
So then coming in verse 334, it says, from thinking that some should never be released. So if you have the kind of thought that holding others in prison is to cause them harm, or you want to hold them indefinitely without ever releasing them, you develop behaviors and attitudes that contradict your precepts. So such an attitude of like never releasing someone or wanting to harm them in prison would contradict holding even 1 day vows, let alone like upasika vows, those householder kinds of vows. And by having that kind of contradiction to one's precepts, so the next two lines read, from contradicting your precepts, you continually accumulate more negativity. So here, when you have that kind of attitude, like I'll never release this person, basically that means that you're consenting to doing something that is against your vows. You can't generate or hold vows while engaging in activities like that. And so, so long as one is doing that, you will continuously be accumulating negativities that are going to bring forth suffering in the future, the lower realms, and so forth.
Oh, today you ain't yoda. Peter Batson is shooting 찹산 땅가 마당 저 샤네 거대네 거 냠바스네 조반나라 코라 땅 주제 되지요래 아니 녀다 뭐부 땅이라 동기라 저네 칼라 마다서 샤야라 되게 마부셔라 대저리데 메다라 전리 조에데 전리 조 마도지 전리 대저리가 야부치고 계시도 단이반에서 그러니까 전에 지시 마당와 어디 단이바들이다 전에 주변 내가 나야 사야 통해다 저 ten진도 야부샤고 그래서라 가셔 로마 가셔 전에 된데도 전에 주네 강도도 제 초가 된대요라 근데 지금은 전에 전에 주에 주래 그제마다 주 대저런가 고민내시 사야 통해 간 것들이 야부시 샤고요라 근데 마샤니 되요 말이서 단 전기 체양 야부시 샤고를 쏠 대변내구나 전에 지세 마당와 대봐도 제캔당서 전에 마당 봐도랴 다샹게다 라 대주시거라 다도주샤주 알아샤도 튕기거라 대주 강 가바테르 강 두두체게요라 강 두두체마도 근데 전지 말해서 그 미뤄와 거기 전기 체양 마당와 그러니까 대봐도 땡게다 따땡게 따샹게다 근데 트다 서부 트에다 라 사야 동에도 사다 동하다 근데 매다 나나 매라 서보다 덴베 대와리 기세 대외 통지 상황시 그래서 그 도도시에서 고점벌에서 가리네 제저 동담 강가지라 어떻게 제초 말해서 야 됐지라면
So then next, while the prisoners are imprisoned, how they should be sort of kept comfortable. So here then this comes in verse 335, and until I mean we see like there are really some horrific stories of what happened to people in prison, like not being allowed to use the restroom and having to go all over themselves, not being given adequate food or clothing or hygiene facilities and so forth. So that sort of attitude of like, well, it's a prison, we can just do whatever, that is not acceptable. I mean, people can be imprisoned for a purpose, but it's not as though that should be made to be a place of further sort of punishment or torture. So here it says then in 335, until they are released, those prisoners should be made content by providing them with barbers, baths, food, drink, clothing, and medical care. So they should, until they are released, while they are being held, prisoners should be adequately cared for, like given access to, say, barbers, to be able to take care of the hygiene related to their hair and so forth. Should be given facilities to wash themselves and keep those kinds of hygiene. Should be given food and drink, clothing, and medical care. Again, we shouldn't have this sort of attitude of like, oh, well, it's a prison, so whatever goes, goes. I don't need to think about what's happening there. But instead, prisoners should be adequately cared for while they are in custody.
야, 다들 심지어 소주 팀바 내내 바에 부다라 시도 아니 너도 롱아 잔데 따르세 닌지 얘네 차르제차에 당에 많이 너처럼이세 단데 저와지고도 저한테 동해계배치도 전에 송해도 동해계배치도 송하러 콜 동해 당겨 말에 가가야야 사고르서나네 전에 송내 가르쳐 오래시거라 송고 말어 와서 동해계배치도 송하 미남세 그 도부당에 저도 그 송하 말어 와서 그 야부제치도 옛날에 송고 말어 와서 전에 좀 송고 말어 와서 대화를 제바 지시를 제냐한테 대화 가르쳐 줘 그래서나 텔레비전 얘기도 미륵바 제바 돼서 보고 잡던데 얘나야 소소 판마도 저기 미륵바 제나 그 제외 돈에고 또 저쪽으로 같은데 제 요아래서 와라 내가 좀 받아서 너네 바에 부탁라서 너도 미루와 내가 야구 매칭 그 판마 주고 양고 그 네가 땅에 지도가 그 도부전 땅에 오마 그또 주라시나 섬 야르시나 섬 삼바상부터는 요땅 요라 너네 바에 부탁라 너도 롱아 찬도다 네 많이 봐 가지고 좀 마시게 상으로 해체도 니지 얘네 살제 차에 다야 많이 네 실면서 니지 거네 살제 지한도 와서 저번에 메시아 살제는 마음받는 메시아에서도 당화 제가 말했어 대체만 코나 야도 해체도 지기 알았어 어디나시 근데 제고가 그 시험 거 알았어 거라 니지 이름 살제 봐야 많이 노르데베시도 제버샤 메nos 근데 전에 존이야 사고치자 노르잘라 레야다 tindeche도 주바 말했어 야 tindes 티스케
So here then in 336 the question might arise, well, okay, if you're putting them in prison, isn't that for them to suffer? Why would you make people comfortable while they are imprisoned? Like that just seems against what you're doing. Like that, isn't it just to make them suffer that you are putting them in prison? Well, here the example is then given in 336, as if you have the intention of making unruly children behave properly, you should not discipline them out of you should discipline them out of compassion, not out of anger or the desire for material gain. So just in the same way that like a parent who out of compassion for their child, when they want to correct some kind of unruly behavior, they're going to discipline them in some way. They might show some wrath, they might be stern, but they aren't trying to inflict pain, right? They want for something to change for the better. So a punishment in terms of even imprisoning someone should be done out of compassion, not out of like a desire to make them suffer, not out of anger, right? Not out of a desire for some kind of material gain, like, oh, by holding them here, I'll be able to get lots of money. The desire, the kind of impulse to imprison should be based upon like a mother or father's wish to correct a bad child's behavior, and that is driven by compassion.
뭐야 다시 봐드라 레서 메로나 트레버 차와시도 코바 주주 당시 계제셰체는 코페 야로 마치나 니만나시 멤버스 코 야로 레서 멘도나 아니 코피샤 그래서 롱바 샨달 파피 그래서 와라 경비 당시라 돌레네 경비 장르부 롱바 샨다 텐데 당시래 에텔레 타네 콘조 코테테 텐데 레시피게 좀베레 텐데 테스테는 코야 롱바 티날 뇨타 티날 메사 코야 토스 조안로야 그 티치거라 어디서래 시바 갈세도스나 rabdan sobar chebe misera shenla rabdu dan shenra shedan kebom shen sobar shenda se da chi naloli kari da mission da trada tinde da kamaga tinde se ko tanda samloma dan je ko tinde nyanga yobishina ta ko longba tina yong me cho so longba shenda tinde susu longba korang longba yibase te longba tar bu tinde shenda ba chi chen ko te le te gre se pisho se ne ko te longba tina ma te sa kari kam se ya ta tinde yong maro o tinde chu sa o ya ka sura rabdan sobar chebe mi se ra shenla tangbu che je ene tangsem ge ko shenda se go samsa da ta sui na lumbo ina kya ina mima sui na se se tinde ina e ko longba tina ma sha se gora chando so tang ne se te chona sha de tang ko de se so je ba la so ba nyen je chi me che be chi che me che ta de se ma ba na ko tinde che sa ra che me ta de ten de ko te ne se ora le ba ke ne me che na tang yo sa me che sta ko jua chen sha ballo ko tinde me se tinde che sa ma re sam na tang yo su sha se nam ji ne sha ta dong ngar je dile ko do sa ma re sam ta da che ba nge ba tinde chi re sang bu to na ane long ba shan da fa ta se do me ne na me se che ko se yo ma re zhong le che zhong che yo ma re ne ba shan ya me ji wa shan da ni ba tang ji yo ma yu ne zhe ne long ba ko rang ge ta ring bu long ba shan da fa pi sha ko de se wa ra da de zhe xie se o de ji lam na
So then fourth of this section is verse 337, where it says that if someone is completely unruly, as in you're not able to create some kind of transformation in them, that they should be expelled from the country. So here it says in verse 337, having properly examined and identified particularly hateful murderers, you should send them into exile without killing or harming them. So here again, if it's impossible to reform someone such that they are going to change, then it said that you should expel them to a faraway kind of land, send them to a place wherein maybe the laws there will sort of correct them. But here, this is in order to prevent them from being able to cause trouble at home. And so here, if there are those that are like thoroughly hateful, that are likely to say kill the king or kill others, and they are released from prison, we should examine well whether they are likely to reoffend or not. Will they do this again? And if it isn't, if you evaluate and say, well, you know, I don't think they're going to actually commit another kind of crime like they did before, then they should be just sort of left alone. You leave them in a neutral kind of place. But if it seems as though they are sort of incorrigible, like they are likely to do something negative again, such as killing and so forth, in order that they not be able to do that in your land, you should send them far away, expel them into like if they're not someone that can be corrected, they're likely to offend again without killing them. So you shouldn't be engaging in capital punishment or harming them in any other way. You should send them off to a faraway place, expel them far away.
Oh yeah. Don't they tell us, you were changing army to Balasita. Tiger, never, Mother. Never chang army to Balanisa. Niba. Tama Igangari over the Manaba says, Yawatato Sevuresera. That Niba Telecaresana. Narme Sadu Trubala Lapcurese, Saba to Gures, Tiredua. Tatambutal Sadu Trubala Vetel Caresana. Sobatane. Chamata Kebarchanda, Tepe, Sobatane, Lumba Kangal Tato Chevures, Yabuya. And a tepe cheta, Tambo Sobatane, Teredua, Lumba Casagalia, Sobatane, Kinja, at Tabu Tenjam, Jayabusite, Chitisura. Rawaya, but you could, Yadua. Rawaya, but you could young, sir. And Chamata. Changes, Chamata Sobatel Sigua, Sobached, Sees, Tado, Paye, Tande, but Sheda Timbe, Sheda Timbe, and the Care, Tanjo, she is a timber. Tadi Carsidosina, Rawaya Bacha Chetos, Mimatama Rawache, Kuma Chapata, Kajuma Junior, Rayomara, saw a never chill, never which tattoo Chetos. Gave down here, and then gave down a hammer watch over it. So by inviting the hammer watch down with the gave down the Machera, gave down a Meshebe, down you was Tata Dosing, Sobada, and Jogba down has a Tatu shoes or Lumba Casagal, Sobatan with a Tejagat on the Segura, which Lumbina sang me out of that. You can, you can do as well. Chamata change, Sig, Chamata Sobatan, Kanga Hakoach or Esora, Sigla. Tato Payu, and Trambatan Temper, Shoda Tibe, Twenty Chase, Samuel Saw me around to the net to be a watching the shadow, Lumbal Sobatan, Tato Yabu, Tenjayo. Tenja Sigura, Yabujan. Intene Kareshe, Chawa Mimba, Cheba Ponche, Payu dan Dembala, Combetan, or Chawa Mimba, Kim Dangawa, Lumbena, something may I say. So Payu Sunday, Tebo Chese Kanga, 시디체 때 전달이야 차례 제거돼서 소바다는 야 된데서
No. So then second, we turn to sort of developing previously non-existent practices is how Jeffrey translated
무서워.
this. And so the topic that came before was then not allowing the sort of degeneration of those practices that were previously there, trying to foster those and keep those up. And here is establishing practices that maybe weren't there before. And so the first of these is achieving practices or these phenomenon. First is then sending out, we could say representatives or even spies or surveyors. So here in this verse 338, it reads, independently survey all lands through the eyes of agents, always vigilant and mindful, do what should be done in accord with the Dharma. And here, really, this independently is kind of like in order to preserve one's independence of the land. So whatever kind of land is under one's control, to make sure that there aren't like bandits, there aren't thieves, there aren't people who are doing bad things, in order for peoples to have the kind of freedoms that they do within that land, you should send out, and here it's really using the language of those that are going sort of under in stealth, not being seen. You should send out surveyors or spies in order to preserve the security, the peace and harmony of that country, in order to make sure that there's not disruption or unrest and so forth. One should have a good idea of what is going on within one's area of control, and make sure that there are not, again, things that are dangerous to one's constituency and so forth. And one should always be vigilant and mindful, should have conscientiousness, one could say, to act in accordance with the Dharma. And so, abandoning anything that is other than that, one should really achieve one's purposes with this kind of conscientiousness.
뭐야 다음에 쏘고 되라
Right.
연대내라 당니 제스 그가서도서 연대 전부 여기 결론을 속보다 현대 수인의 어때줄이야 개부 고랑게네 로바체 때주 따도야 보셔보래서라 연대 전부 여기 도줄라선 연대내라 당니 제스 개부 고랑게 랍진세 심바야 부네 사야통야를 속보다주자 니고 샵도야 보셔보래서 순데 림두다세 샵지야 보셔보래 자체 제수 퇴자신세 자신부터 절 따도시고 따연대 여기 가서도 조시거라 지단럽도 좋아다 힌두카레 내고 제수고 롱베나로 고요라 텐데랴 튕제도 야보찬 제베 따도 야보시고 그래서 상만 남라야서 되네 시트도 냠도 여기 코르라서 뭐 신다야 요네 테줄라야 고치르 바 코란도 팀바 세고 마봉보시 로바시고 그래서 너도 연대 Kene kelon la soba, tangi je seko la soba rabdu, chimba chingo rese, kurdi rimdu la soba, chachida, chesu timba chorshin, yunde, tesa mechebe kansa solaya, o rabdu chunga la soba tesu senja, chimba la soba, ribar kios, ya tindi,
So then the next verse is verse 339, which here is dealing with sort of giving to and supporting those who have good qualities. So it says, through extensive and suitable generosity, respect, and service, devote yourself always to those who are the foundation of good qualities. Do the same for the rest as is appropriate. So here where it says to those who are the foundation of good qualities, those who have great qualities, and this is regardless of their religion, whether they are like ordained, they're Buddhist monastics, or they're Hindu, or they're of other religions, those who have good qualities, one should give generously to them, show them respect and service, and devote yourself to them, really taking care of those who uphold those kinds of good qualities. Again, whether it is Buddhist monks and nuns, or Hindus, or any others, help them so that their needs are met, so that they aren't in danger of not having enough food or drink and so forth. And even for those that don't have that same level of qualities, it says then do the same for the rest as is appropriate, making sure that even if they don't have especially great sort of qualities, taking care of them with generosity, and making sure that that sangha has enough to eat and drink and so forth.
Oh yeah, that is it. Oh yeah, that is so.
So our time is up for today. So I guess we'll be leaving it there for a little bit of a break.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Genla.
Well,
And thank you so much for caring for us like a mother to her only child. Your motivations are so inspiring. Yeah. And thank you, Katrina, for the beautiful translations. Have a look in the chat box for information about how to make an offering to Genla and Katrina and the Abbey for hosting. And we'll finish with some dedications now.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, teacher, thank you. Oh yeah, Gala.